Well, thank you, worship team. Those at home, if you have access, I encourage you to open your Bibles to Revelation chapter 13. And as I mentioned a moment ago, it's Patriots Day. A lot of people say, what? Is your calendar messed up? Patriots Day most recently was September 11th. And in fact, some pretty far-reaching legislation was passed in the wake of that, called the Patriot Act. In my humble opinion, I'm no lawyer and I don't play one on TV, but it's a little bit of an overreach, and I think perhaps we're seeing some of the fruit of that in this lockdown. I am not demeaning at all the efforts of the medical profession to keep us healthy. We appreciate that. Just kind of concerned about some things, and I'm going to talk about that today. The Patriot Act, the Patriot Day, the act of throwing off the shackles of tyrannical government in our Revolutionary War. The original Patriot Day was today, April 19th, in 1775. And just to lighten up a little bit here, we'll start with a humor, I think. If we could advance that, Darren. Yeah. I don't know if this is Dumb or Dumber or anything, but he's expressing the desire of many of us. Hope we can get out of this lockdown by the 4th of July so we can celebrate our freedom and our liberty. If that weren't so true, it would be funny. But Patriot Day, April 18th, General Gage in Boston, he was in command of a large group of the British regulars, received word from his superiors to attack the city of Concord, some 20 miles to the west of Boston, where the Minutemen, the Patriots, had stashed away some cannon and some ammunition and some powder, and it was his intent to go and relieve them of that store. And so he took off at night under the cover of darkness. And the word got out that the British were starting to move and do something unusual. They'd been hanging out in Boston for so long. And so somebody slipped and said a couple of words that Gage was going towards Concord. And Gage realized that the jig was up, and so he sealed the city, trying to prevent any people from going to Concord to warn them of the advancing troops that night. Well, you know, Paul Revere and a couple of the guys got out of the town, and he's been memorialized in some poems and stuff, the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. This is what the Boston Marathon commemorates. The third Monday of April every year, there's a race, except this year it was canceled. It commemorates the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere, 20 miles west, and in the 1895 or so, one of the city fathers said, hey, let's do a race, a marathon. It had just been done in the Olympics the year before. It went well, so let's have our own. And they decided to commemorate this midnight ride. That was April 18th. By dawn on the 19th, Paul Revere had already been to Lexington, and you see it in the circle there, if you can see the slides in the middle. And he'd warned them that they were coming, and he had started off towards Concord. He was captured. A couple other guys were captured along with him, and but one made it through, and they got to Concord and said, the British are coming. At dawn on April 19th in Lexington, about 70 Minutemen gathered on the green there in the middle of the city, and they met about 800 British troops. Why this is important for our purposes today, I just like history, but I want to make you aware, if you're not already, of the incredible Christian heritage we have in the fight for liberty. Not only were the British going to Lexington and Concord to capture cannon and ammunition, there were two leaders of the revolution holed up in a house in Lexington by the name of John Hancock and Samuel Adams. It's interesting that they were staying at the house of Pastor Jonas Clark. Jonas Clark had been preaching liberty for years to his congregation. And in fact, out of the 70 people gathered on the Lexington Green, 60 of them were from his church. There were 8 fatalities that morning. The British killed 8 of the Minutemen. 6 of them were from his church. So Christianity has a long history in America of fighting tyranny. Now, I don't have the time today to argue about a lot of stuff here. It's up to you to decide, should Christians, based on Romans 13 and other things that Jesus tells us to love our neighbors, love our enemies, should Christians be involved in that kind of resistance to an ordained government like the British government? I believe, and that's my thesis for today, I think Christians have not only the opportunity to push back, I think we have a duty and a moral obligation to resist tyranny. And I'm concerned that some churches, even this week, are saying that we should not question the government lockdown. We should just obey until the government gives us permission to get back together. I'm concerned about that on a lot of levels, and I'm going to share that a little bit this morning. That's the opening battle. The shot heard round the world was the opening battle of the American Revolution. The end of the battle, 4 years later, 1780, in Springfield, New Jersey, also had a major role played by Christians. You may have heard the phrase, "give 'em Watts." The muskets back in those days had wadding that you needed to ram down there to load them. In this particular battle, the Minutemen were running low on wadding, and Pastor James Caldwell, ran into a nearby church and grabbed the hymnals. And the hymnal was Isaac Watts. It had hundreds and hundreds of songs in there, published by Benjamin Franklin, by the way, that hymnal. And he grabbed all these hymnals out of the church and ran out there and tore the pages out, and he was distributing them so they could use them as wadding. And he said, "Give 'em Watts." So that's one of the famous things there. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, if you were watching the Feast of Dedication, the Maccabean Revolt, God has a habit sometimes of giving incredible victories to people who are resisting overwhelming forces. The Maccabean Revolt in 165 BC was a case in point. He resisted Antiochus Epiphanes, who was a forerunner of the Antichrist, which is what we're going to get into here in Revelation chapter 13. Overwhelming forces with initially just his family, and then a couple other rebels joined the cause, and they actually threw off the yoke of the Seleucids and cleansed the temple and reinitiated Jewish worship. And it was celebrated by the Jews. Jesus went there at the Feast of Dedication in John chapter 10. The battles of Lexington and Concord were the first. The Battle of Springfield was the last. But all the way through the Revolutionary War, Christians were at the forefront in leading this resistance to tyranny. Now, we could say, well, they were sinning, or they were just selfish white people who wanted to protect their property. I don't think we should easily dismiss these men who pledged their honor and their wealth and their very lives, and most of them forfeited their lives. They believed in the cause of freedom of religion, for one thing, freedom of speech, freedom of the right to peacefully assemble, and that's all wrapped up in the freedom of press. That's all in just the First Amendment. And they believed in it when they established it for us, and we shouldn't squander it so readily. Patrick Henry has said we must guard with jealous attention the public liberty and suspect anyone who messes with it. James Madison, the father of the Constitution, it is universal truth that the loss of liberty at home is to be charged to the provisions against danger, real or pretended. We have a long history in the United States of preparing for war, whether it's real or imagined. Certainly we don't want to be unprepared for war, but if we're not careful, we see a boogeyman under every bush. and we overreact. We're now doing that with this medicine and this medical crisis. Our president keeps calling it a war. It is not a war. It is a medical crisis, and that we are handling it by God's grace. We're seeing some the flattening of the curve, thank God. But if we can fan the flames of fear, what happens is government reaches in to calm people down and to extend their power and their influence. When the people fear the government, Thomas Jefferson said, there's tyranny. When the government fears the people, there's liberty. Our first president under our current Constitution, George Washington. If anybody would have a good handle on war, the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army, and an understanding of the Constitution, it was the first president. And he said this: government is not reason. It is not eloquent. It is force. Like fire, it is a dangerous servant and a fearful master. I'm thankful for human government. It's God ordained. I've been saying that for a few weeks. But it does not get a pass to just run amok over people's rights and individual liberties. So this one world government, chapter 13 of Revelation, verse 3 verses. I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. I saw one of his heads as if it had been slain, and his fatal wound was healed, and the whole earth was amazed and followed after the beast. You don't have to look very far to realize that we are right there now with a one world government. People are calling for it. This crisis has given opportunity for people, louder voices, to call for it again. We want a government that can solve all of our problems, that can be unified and centralized and powerful enough to fix things. Well, it's on its way. Antiochus Epiphanes' antecedent here, the Antichrist, is going to come. He may be afoot somewhere now. He may not come for 100 years. But we are creeping towards, and now we're lurching towards, and maybe even rushing towards one world government. Jesus said this: I have come in my Father's name, and you do not receive me. If another shall come in his own name, you will receive him. Well, Daniel prophesies that that's what the Antichrist is going to do. The king will do as he pleases, and he will exalt and magnify himself above every god, and will speak monstrous things against the true God. That's all the way through Revelation 13, and we see it in Revelation 17, religious Babylon, chapter 18, commercial Babylon. So the question is, should Christians just shut up? We're commanded to obey the authorities and to submit, and maybe we ought to just pipe down and let the experts, the smart people, handle things. In fact, that's what one of the pastors, a popular pastor this week, said on social media. As Americans, our man-given freedom of speech seems to have overridden our God-commanded fear of authority. First of all, our right to free speech is not man-given. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that we have certain inalienable rights, and among them are this, 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 and this, and they're given by God, and government is supposed to protect them. Government doesn't grant me anything. The government is supposed to protect me from people trying to usurp or take my God-given liberties. This guy has it backwards. They're man-given freedom. Are you kidding? Man doesn't give freedom. Man gives bondage. We need to repent of this, as complaining against it, defying God-given authority, is sin. I don't believe that. We need to hold people accountable, speak up, certainly non-violently, certainly with all due respect. But we are under no obligation to just shut up and take whatever the government dishes out. Here's the guy this week, calling for, within the last month since the corona thing, a global power to address the coronavirus. Well, the Antichrist isn't going to just come up and say, with a big AC on his chest, here I am, I'm taking over. No, he's going to be subtle, and it's going to be incremental, and he's going to use people to get across this idea we need big government. And here's a guy calling for it. This is from generations past. Rockefeller called for a one world government. a new world order. And his Club of Rome that started in 1968 in his beautiful little place there in Italy, they divided the whole world into 10 regions. Well, my Bible says here in Revelation 13, 1 through 3, that there's going to be 10 heads, 10 horns. Those are crowns, those are districts, those are regions, and it goes right along with this. The United Nations, even more recently, divided up the world into 10 regions. So in order for the Antichrist to have a one world government, he has to take over some sort of a quasi-government that has 10 parts. It's here. It's here for the taking. As difficult as it was for me, I've come to... This is a guy from Procter & Gamble, billionaire heir to the wealth. I believe that an elite group of people and the corporations they run have... See, I'm not a conspiratorial guy. I don't think Trump is up to no good and Nancy Pelosi, they're conniving together to take over the world. But there are opportunities in a crisis where people who are bent on taking over the world can use for their advantage. And this guy saw through it. He was one of the insiders, and then he finally dawned on him, wow, I know what these guys are up to. Virtually every aspect of our lives, and they do it by controlling the world of finance. Not by creating more value, but by actually controlling the source of money. This is the kind of people we need, guys like this. The one world government supporters have one objective in common. They want to bring about the surrender of the sovereignty of the national independence of the United States. What's stopping people from having a one world government right now? Basically the U.S. If we go down, this stuff is going to rush towards its fulfillment. There's a clique within the CFR, Council on Foreign Relations, comprises Wall Street international bankers and their agents. Primarily, they want the world banking monopoly. So whatever blows up, whatever governments crash, they want to be in a position to survive that and control the rebuilding in their own image. President Donald Trump declared he has total authority to order states to relax social distancing just April 13th. He has no authority to order the states to do any such thing. In fact, he didn't have the authority to order the shutdown to begin with. People are really worried about, well, we can't get together for more than 10 people. Our governor says we shouldn't even leave our house. People who want to submit to government, and they want to submit to our president, who wants no groups larger than 10. Well, but what about submitting to state governments? They don't want us to even leave our house. So he's not a globalist, I'm thankful. But he is a centralist. He wants the federal government to make a lot of decisions that are way out of his purview. This guy, former chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel, said, never let a good crisis go to waste. I don't think Trump is the bad guy here. I don't think Congress, I mean, they're certainly playing a role, but they're not conniving together to ruin the world. But there are evil people out there who will take this crisis and make hay with it. Kansas Supreme Court upholds Kansas Governor Laura Kelly. She wanted to limit the size of Easter services to 10 people. It's funny, you see people at Target and Walmart and liquor stores and abortion clinics, they're not limited, but Easter services are limited. She has no authority to make that call. So if you're tracking with me, you'll notice a problem inherent with the Kansas Supreme Court's support of her. What's going on is the executive branch, the governor, makes a dictate, and then when people say, well, I don't know if this is right, they go to another branch of that same government, the Kansas Supreme Court, and say, what do you think? Well, it's pretty obvious what they think. They're always going to support their own government. What we need is an umpire to decide when government overreaches, who do we go to? If the executive branch just says, well, Supreme Court, what do you think? The Supreme Court almost always says, well, yeah, go ahead, executive, you've got the power. Now, I'm not one who says, I told you so, but I told you so. In 2013, if you were part of our Summer of Significance lectures, we talked about the parallels between Nazi Germany and the United States. They're frightening. Dr. Lutzer, he's on KVIP every weekday at noon. He wrote this book, When a Nation Forgets God. This is about Nazi Germany, the exclusion of church from state, economic meltdown, laws circumventing justice, systematic secularization of media, education, culture, everything. Nazi Germany gradually kicked the church out of society. What are we doing? We're gradually kicking the church out of society. He's out of schools. He's out of the city council. Famously, in one of the hearings just recently in the impeachment, one of the congressmen, the chairman of this judicial committee, didn't even have the people swear an oath to tell the truth. And one of the Republican guys said, hey, we're supposed to have them take an oath in the name of God. And the chairman just said, forget it. We don't want God in our deliberations. Well, that's what Nazi Germany did, and that's what the Antichrist is going to do. What do you and I do? What options do we have when we are in dispute with our government? If the government is the one doing evil, where do we go? I'm not fomenting violence. I'm not asking us to revolt. I'm asking us to pursue a nonviolent resistance to overreaching government. To consider the judges of the Superior Court as the ultimate arbiters of constitutional questions would be a dangerous doctrine, Jefferson said. He understood it. He had a lot to do with the founding. So that's the one world government. Here's the one world religion, verses 4 through 8. They worship the beast, saying, who is like the beast, and who is able to wage war with him? There was given him a mouth speaking arrogant words and blasphemies and authority to act for 42 months. 3.5 years, by the way. All who dwell on the earth will worship him. All who dwell on the earth will worship him. Except those whose name was not written into the book of life. Again, Lutzer, we always find ourselves caught between citizens of earth, citizens of heaven. On the other side are any number of lesser gods and the other crosses that promise a false salvation, which are always embodied in the state. C.S. Lewis said this way, if man has free will and is considered accountable for his actions, there are limits on the state's power. In place of punishment for wrongdoing, preemption becomes the means of social control. As championed by authoritarians of both left and right, the state simply eliminates the individual's choice or makes a choice for him or her. Isn't that what's going on? What happened here a couple of weeks ago when they met for church in Florida? The pastor got arrested the following day. 400 people chose to get together and peacefully assemble. They were not charged with passing around a virus. They weren't charged with any acts of violence. What was this guy charged with? Something that is prior restraint. In case you have the bug, we're going to clamp down on your civil liberties. Well, prior restraint is supposed to be prevented by our Constitution. You cannot be held by a policeman because he thinks you might do something bad. But it's always couched in, well, this is for your own good. You Floridians who chose to get together and worship God and fellowship with one another, you really don't know what's best for you. We do. So you can't make a free choice to be there and worship God in your fashion. We're going to prevent you from coming, and if you show up, we're going to arrest you. Lewis says, we know that one school of psychology already regards religion. He was writing this in the early 60s. When this particular neurosis becomes inconvenient for, people, secular people think you Christians watching this are crazy. And they think that the authorities have to step in and tell you when to go to church and when not to go to church, what to say, what to believe, and how to practice it. Pope Benedict XVI called, this was back in 2009, a true world political authority. Now look at Revelation 13, verse 11. I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon. The first beast is going to be the governor of these 10 regions, and this beast is going to be the false prophet. He exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and he makes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose fatal wound was healed. He performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down out of heaven to the earth in the presence of men. He deceives those who dwell on the earth because of his signs. I'm not saying the Pope is the Antichrist. I'm saying religion is going to play right into the government takeover by the Antichrist. His successor, Pope Francis, said the same thing. In fact, he even, in full papal garb, I don't know where the separation of church and state was there, but he went and spoke to a joint houses in our government, in Congress, and basically said there's a new global political authority is what we need. A radical new power to be given control in the world. One world with a common plan. Genesis 11, this started way back there, right? Babylon. Now the whole earth used the same language and the same words, and it came about as they journeyed east, and they found a plain in the land of Shinar, Babylon, and settled there. Babylon still exists, has never been destroyed. Babylon is going to come back with a vengeance, and it will be the center of world religion and world government and world economy. Revelation chapter 17 and 18. Paul said, and with all the deception of wickedness for those who perish because they did not receive the love of the truth so as to be saved. For this reason, God will send upon them a deluding influence so that they will believe what is false, in order that they all may be judged who did not believe the truth. This isn't coming to Christians. This is coming to people who have rejected the truth. God is going to allow them to be duped. So ancient Babylon, religious Babylon, commercial Babylon, they're all around the corner. Last week, the mayor of Louisville, Kentucky, inexplicably attempted to bar a church from holding a drive-in service where no one gets out of their car. Now, here's a federal judge who got it right. Quote, on Holy Thursday, an American mayor criminalized the communal celebration of Easter. That sentence is one that this court never expected to see outside the pages of a dystopian novel or perhaps the pages of The Onion. Mayors. Now, if the president doesn't have the authority to tell you to keep your groups under 10, how is it that a mayor of Louisville can tell you you can't get together? They're not armed, and it's not insurrection. They're not there passing around stuff that's going to kill people. They're there to worship God, and some mayor thinks they can stop that. Well, fortunately, this federal judge said no, but a lot of mayors are stopping it, a lot of governors. In Greensboro, North Carolina, 4 citizens with Love Life filed suit on First Amendment grounds. They were arrested March 28th for violating a stay-at-home order. The clinic director said this was a public health nightmare, as they did not practice social distancing during previous protests and did not wear gloves to this one. But inside, she's killing babies. She's worried about protesters not wearing gloves. This is how far back they were standing. If abortion clinics are essential, why aren't our rights to protest them also essential? To compel a man to subsidize with his taxes the propagation of ideas which he disbelieves and abhors is sinful and tyrannical. Our tax dollars going to kill babies? We have a right to protest. The New York mayor said, you guys get into church, we're going to close you down permanently. Fortunately, he had to back off. Third thing and final, the one world economy. So we have it's on the horizon, folks. A one world government. Lots of leaders are calling for it already, and the pieces are there. a one world religion, and now a one world economy. Verse 16, he causes all, the small and the great, and the rich and the poor, and the free men and the slaves, to be given a mark on their right hand or on their forehead. And he provides that no one will be able to buy or to sell except the one who has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. I don't recall her name, but I think it was the governor of Minnesota. I could be wrong. Maybe it was Michigan or one of these ladies, and that doesn't matter that it's a lady, but she issued an order preventing people from buying seeds for their garden. Was it Michigan? Yeah, but she didn't bother to cite the constitutional authority that gives her that power. We don't want you going out and buying seeds for your garden. It's too dangerous. Why in the world? I'm not going to be surprised at all when somebody suddenly steps up and says, you know, we've got a solution for all this black market and all this illegal giving back and forth. Let's just have one economy controlled from some centralized location, and then we can tell if people are cheating. It's for their own good. Christians who insist that Romans 13 demands an absolute submission to human government as a minister of God would have tribulation saints submitting to the mark of the beast. I mean, if Romans 13 counts for us right now, Romans 13 counts for the saints who are in the tribulation. And if the government says, you've got to take this mark, those people who think absolute submission is mandatory for Christians and for other saints, they'd have to take that mark. Well, that's preposterous. Winston Churchill thought initially Hitler was a good guy. He revived the economy in 4 years. He instituted nationalized health care. He gave millions of Germans vacations. He trained workers. He made Germany great again. Where have we heard that? The technology, this is from 2013. That's my old phone. You really don't have to have anything in your right hand or on your forehead. If you have one of these phones, they've got your info already. They can be equipped with fingerprint scanners, biometrics, voice ID, vein scanners. They're already in use by Border Patrol, hospitals, banks, and libraries. Near-field communication. If your phone is close to my phone, I can steal your stuff. The FBI, and this is a Patriot Act by Kavanaugh, by the way, appointed to the Supreme Court through a lot of, a lot of people were worried about his girlfriend 30 years ago. I'm worried about his constitutional understanding now. He wrote the Patriot Act, most of it. The FBI can hack millions of computers. The IRS can force alternative websites to give up private customers. By the way, that was just strengthened this week with the checks that are coming from the government, the $1,200. It's going into the banks, and you're not getting it in many cases. 4 billion records were stolen in 2016. 41 million Americans have had their identities stolen. Thank you, Patriot Act, for nothing. Thousands of Swedes are inserting microchips under their skin to open garage doors, make purchases, store medical history. Hey, this is so convenient. I don't even have to reach in my wallet anymore. I just pass my hand over. Yeah, well, that's going to be controlled. In fact, it already is. The real reason for this war on cash, start with big bill. See that we're going towards a one world economy, and one of the things that they have to change, we can't have 100 different currencies. So let's just get rid of cash and do it all digitally. Electronic commerce makes it easier for Big Brother to see what we're doing, thereby making it simpler to bar things they don't like. Purchasing salt, Big Gulps, or Big Macs. Or seeds for your garden, or any number of other things. These are real headlines. 2015, forcing Cajuns in Louisiana to go cashless. Capital controls are coming. That was 2016. So even if the stock market rebounds, how are we going to recover from this stimulus? $6 trillion have been promised and they're working on more right now. Oh, that wasn't enough. The loans have all been given out, and we got to go back to Congress for more. Why bother? How are we going to recover from this? Raise taxes? As of yesterday, the estimated total of all U.S. gross domestic product is $21.7 trillion. The estimate of all privately owned property is 14.7. You put those together, if they taxed all of that and took it, you can't pay the deficit. You can't pay the debt. When Trump took office in 2016, the national debt was about $18 trillion. By the time he finishes his first term, it'll be $30 trillion. Some are saying $33 trillion. We cannot ever pay that. Ever. There's not enough wealth to reduce that debt. What about bail-ins? You've heard of bailouts? We had those in 2008. Now there's bail-ins. You have savings, you have retirement, they're going to take it. 2016, these guys already said bail-ins are legit. They've already done it in Greece and Cyprus. I wouldn't be surprised if they do it here. Again, real headlines. Dallas stares down a Texas-sized threat of bankruptcy. So how did they react? They froze the pensions for policemen and firemen. And they're taking those pensions to pay the bill of the city. Expect more of that. There is one honest voice in Congress. I'm sure there's others. The $2.2 trillion stimulus package, this is Thomas Massey, 4th District, Kentucky, Republican. The Fed has promised $4 trillion in aid, Congress $2.2 trillion. That's $6.2 trillion. If we wrote a check to every citizen, every person living in the United States of America, we would all get $60,000. I got people I'm rubbing shoulders with on Thursdays that are excited about $1,200 coming their way. Oh, I get hard. Well, the government stole that from somebody to give it to you. And if this $6 trillion, we should be getting a check for $60,000. Where's that money going? Massey asked. Where is the money going? It's going to some fat cats who are well connected, and the Fed and the big corporate cronies, and they're making millions and millions and millions of dollars, and we're supposed to be satisfied with a check for $1,200. The stimulus bill authorizes loans in excess of $454 billion by the Fed. Central bankers are given. Here's another thing. Built into this stimulus package that Senator Harris, Senator Feinstein, Speaker Pelosi, and Congressman LaMalfa all voted for, built into that legislation is we don't have to tell anybody who we're giving this money to. Total autonomy. And they have suspended the Sunshine Law, which told these lawmakers and these people who are handling the finances, we have to have the right to go in and look at your books. Where'd the money go? They've suspended that. Why did they do that? Because they don't have your best interests at heart. Well, what about devalue currency? Essentially, that's what happens anyway with inflation. We're going to still see some more movement towards that. Brazil devalued its currency in 1983 by 30%, and then they did it again. The purchasing power of your dollar in 100 years, 1913 to 2013, went from $1 to 5 cents. First quarter of this year, 17% drop in value. Print more money. Well, that's been the go-to solution. Borrow from somebody? Let's see, who has $33 trillion just laying around? China? The UK? Russia? The Fed? That's what we're doing, borrowing from those guys. And the Federal Reserve sounds like a government agency. No, a whole bunch of private bankers loaning money to the government and making trillions of dollars back. So what do? We need an umpire. Well, Thomas Jefferson had a solution for this. It's called nullification. When the government usurps authority that they do not have, they were not granted by the states have the right to nullify that law. Some of you went to my lectures on that a couple years ago. Nullification is constitutional, and the only way to preserve the Union, as bad as California is, I'm not trying to get them to secede. We're trying to get them to fix the problem, address it. We don't want violence. We don't, we had one revolution. It's very deadly. Don't want another one if we could avoid it. So somebody has to be an umpire to decide, and it's the states. They have the authority to just say to the government, quit taking our money, and you cannot tell us to shut down our economy, and you can't tell us to stay in our house. You don't have that authority. Just tell them, we nullify your executive orders that are not constitutionally supported. Well, they're going to push back. They're not going to like that. So what's it in dispute? Freedom of movement. Yesterday, I got a little video, and we're running out of time, so we don't have time to mess with it anyway, but in Costa Rica, there's a wide open beach, just a couple people there, a surfer and another sunbather, and 2 cops. Pacific Ocean. Nobody out there. They chased the guy with the surfboard and shot at him. Now, it's on the video. Maybe they were rubber bullets. Maybe they were tranquilizers. I don't know what it is. But this guy was violating a stay-at-home order by surfing in the Pacific Ocean, nobody around for 30 miles, and a cop chased him, and when the surfer ran off, the cop shot at him. So we don't want you spreading your germs, so we're going to spread bullets. What's at stake? Freedom of movement, freedom of religion, freedom of speech. You can't criticize the government anymore? You're going to go to jail? Can't get together and worship God when they say stay away? Well, Christians, you're going to have to decide. Where is your loyalty? What Jefferson sought was a mode of resistance that would allow a state to remain in the Union, but at the same time recognize its right to defend itself against federal usurpation. Nullification to Jefferson was not radical, but middle. Well, what am I calling for today? Well, courageous Christians to insist on our freedom of religion that is God ordained. It's not granted by the government. It's granted by God, and it's been defended by good, solid Americans for 250 years. Are we going to just squander it? Let the government tell us what to do? Here's another thing. Men and women in uniform, I'm calling for them to refuse to obey immoral, unconstitutional, and evil orders. Do I have a God-intended responsibility to submit to government? Yes. And so do the people who put on a uniform and a badge and a gun. And what is the government? We, the people. It's not just one-sided, I have to obey authorities. The authorities also have to obey a higher calling. And I'm calling on veterans or people wearing uniforms today in positions of authority to stop shooting at surfers. Stop arresting people at birthday parties. Stop taking down license numbers of the cars parked in a church parking lot on Easter. You don't have to do it. Now, I'm just going to quickly give you a little thing here. I told my family I would. My family has a long history of military service and law enforcement. World War II, on my mom's side, a couple of uncles served, and a couple of my uncles served. U.S. Navy, Army, Korea, World War II. I had an uncle in the Air Force, career guy, who was had a high clearance for intelligence, and he did stuff that he couldn't even share with his family. On my father's side, 2 uncles, one U.S. Army, one U.S. Marines, both World War II. My uncle Mike saw action in Okinawa. He retired as a master sergeant and was presented by President Lyndon Johnson with a commendation. He's the only non-commissioned officer in the history of the United States to serve World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. Now, maybe somebody has done that since then. He was the only non-com officer. Lots of guys with scrambled eggs do that. He was a sergeant. Brother served in the U.S. Navy in Vietnam. My father-in-law, he earned his citizenship by fighting in World War II. I have a first cousin who recently retired as the longest-serving chief of police in California history. Another one, MP in the Army and cop in Sacramento. A cousin by marriage who retired as a battalion chief of Sacramento County Fire. I got my son-in-law is a paramedic right now with the Vancouver Fire Department. This congregation has many veterans and a number of retired military and law enforcement, some of whom I count as personal friends. Far be it from me to just attack people in uniform. I want to honor our founders, but I want to challenge our veterans. You do not have to submit to unconstitutional, immoral orders. The time to choose is before the heat of the moment. Selma, Montgomery, Kent State. The National Guard was called in to put down an anti-war protest at Kent State. The year I signed up for the draft, 1974, students shot in cold blood. Oh, that would never happen here. It happens here with all too much frequency. These guys are saying, help, we want to go back to work. And people say, oh, no, you're a risk to everybody else. That's prior restraint. You can't do that. Prior constraint here. Yesterday, 40 cops showed up in a neighborhood in Los Angeles. A family was having a birthday party for a 1-year-old. And look at the show of force. With all due respect, Mr. Policeman, you do not have to follow immoral orders. Now, if they were putting people at risk or jamming the streets and the traffic was fine. Go give them a ticket. But to get together to celebrate a little girl's birthday, come on. This is a professional surfer arrested in Costa Rica. Right up the way was where the other guy got shot at the next day. Well, we were just following orders. We're just doing what our commander said. That is not legitimate. We decided that in Nuremberg in 1945 and 6. Oh, we were just following orders. You don't have to. We need more guys like this. United States Navy veteran in his dress uniform out in the surf, protesting. This is the land of the free. There's a cop there with his hands on his shoulders. I wonder what he did. Because what I'm suggesting is that policeman should salute that guy and move on. Right? To wade out there in the surf and arrest him. He's standing against the Pacific Ocean. That's a pretty big place. I think that's social distancing. And I salute this guy who put on his uniform and went and protested. This is the land of the free. At least we thought it was. I'm also calling for elected officials to keep their oath of office to uphold the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Scriptures first, Constitution second. If you will not fight for right, now this is a couple years after he thought Hitler did such a good job making the trains run on time. Then he started to see what Hitler was really like in 1939. If you will not fight for right when you can easily win without bloodshed, if you will not fight when your victory is sure and not too costly, you may come to the moment when you have to fight with all the odds against you and only a precarious chance of survival. There may even be a worse case. You may have to fight when there is no hope of victory because it is better to perish than to live as slaves. I wonder if that goes down easily with people today. Would you rather be in bondage and slavery or go down with a principled fight? It's a fair question. Christians are asking, well, didn't Jesus tell us to love our enemies? Yes, he did. Pastor Clark believed that in Lexington. Pastor Caldwell in Springfield, New Jersey believed that. John Hancock, Samuel Adams believed that. But when your enemy is at your door, locked and loaded, intending to do you harm, your duty is to defend your life and property, and especially those who you hold dear. Jesus, when he says love your enemy, he's not talking about hand-to-hand combat. He told his disciples to buy swords and get ready. This is the guy they were after back there in Lexington. The British were marching to go get a cannon and go get some powder. And oh, by the way, get these ringleaders. John Hancock. Resistance to tyranny becomes the Christian and social duty of each individual. Continue steadfast and with a proper sense of your dependence on God, nobly defend those rights which heaven gave, and no man ought to take from us. And I'll close with this. This is a killer quote. I use it a lot. Samuel Adams, the father of the American Revolution. If you value wealth more than liberty and tranquility, more than the animated contest of freedom, then go home from us in peace. We want neither your counsel nor your arms. Crouch down and lick the hands that feed you. And may your chains lay lightly on your back, and posterity forget that you ever were our countrymen. So the gauntlet is laid down, folks. The government thinks it has the power to tell you to stay home and to shut up. And there are forces behind the government that want to use this crisis to put their fingers and their control farther and farther into our private lives, so that someday they can hand over to the Antichrist a one world government, one world religion, and one world economy. And we are on the precipice. But as Winston Churchill said, maybe we can't win. Maybe if we push back, God won't grant us a victory in the face of insurmountable odds. That's possible. But would you rather be slaves? Or would you rather go down with a principled fight? As for me, I'm not going away quiet. And I know there's millions of people like me that say enough is enough. Christians, stand up and be heard before it's too late. We owe this to our grandchildren. Too late in my case. My kids are adults and they've got their own lives and they're doing their own thing and they're fighting back where they can. But what about my grandkids? Someday I'm going to look them in the eye and say, sorry, I didn't take a stand when I should have, and now you can't meet publicly. You can't preach Jesus Christ. You can't read your Bible in a public place. Grandpa, why? Well, thank you.